Hello and welcome to today's content, which we'll be talking about Muraga Fennes, since his selection quest is out, and yeah, since he is going to be free, I highly recommend a lot of people to try and work towards it because it is a selection quest unit. Without further ado, let's begin. So here we are for the main job abilities, which is going to be the Savage King for the main job. Keep in mind, the icon does look like the Vikings, and I do believe it actually is, but the title is called Savage King in particular, so it will be different from Viking. He's going to get Shield Breaker, which is very nice for physical breaking. Serpent Stance is going to be good because this is the only place where he really gets his defense penetration, unfortunately. Sorcery's Shear is going to be very nice. As you can see, the AoE is going to be all around him, and it disables reaction abilities on use, so they won't be like Aeon Bonding or anything. So that's pretty nice. Ruinous Axe is going to be one of his only ranged abilities that does good damage, as well as it buffs himself for Human Killer 30 as a modifier, so he's going to be dealing very high damage once he uses this. From here, he's going to be using Tyrannical Reeve, which is going to have a slash resistance penetration by 30% for himself, only for this ability. It deals a good amount of damage and has a chance to slow. It's going to be a 28 cost AP, and I put that there specifically because of the EX buff on it. So from here, the EX upgrades. Serpent Stance is going to turn to Serpent King's Stance. So from here, it's going to add basically 10 more defense to the buff, which is very nice because 25 defense is a significant amount of defense. That's literally, without penetration or anything, that's literally 25% straight up at minimum more mitigation from physical damage. And then from here, Tyrannical Reeve is going to turn into Mad Tyrant's Reeve, which is going to basically lower the AP cost from 28 to 22. There's no other real changes to that. It's just going to be nice because it is very AP friendly pretty much to use, and it does a good amount of damage. His EX ability he gains is going to be Skull Crusher, which does a good amount of damage, and one of his more long-range AoE abilities. And yes, I say long-range even though it's only 3 tiles. This is literally one of his long-range abilities by 3 tiles. For his sub-job, Ruin Bringer is going to not only consume his own HP, it grants him 100% debuff resistance for 3 turns. But it also has a chance to berserk him, so you have to be careful. Keep in mind here, defense debuff resistance at 100% is significantly broken in certain circumstances. For example, in this situation, this means like Helena's like Tenebral Rose or something. It's not going to Darken Peril because it can't debuff Muraga. Keep in mind, penetration and such are different, that it does kind of bypass that because it's not a debuff, but having a debuff for any debuff resistance for 100% is pretty significant. Also keep in mind, this does not include status ailments. Those are all different categories, and I do have a video on like buffs and status ailments if you haven't seen it already. From here we have Draining Rend, which is a decent amount of damage. It's kind of like Sorcery's Shear's AoE, what it looks like that, but it's kind of more like Killing Axe in that regard. And it heals him for the damage dealt, so it's good if you're able to sustain with that AoE. From here, the Paladin subjob, and what I would highly recommend to use, because not only is he going to get Taunting Blade, his longest range high hitting ability, as well as like gaining hate on himself, he also has Immortal Spirit here, which is very important because he doesn't have a lot of survivability outside of his defense and spirit buff he has on Serpent Stance. So he has high HP. Having the Immortal Spirit is going to just be very, very nice to have. From here, he has the Ninja subjob, not really to use. You can use Dream Within a Dream for a 3-hit or a chain. Doton is decent because he'll be able to scale off his like high physical damage, but it's I can't really pass up Immortal Spirit and Taunting Blade over that like kid. So I would really have to just recommend Paladin subjob. So for the resistances and passives, as I said earlier, he has alright resistances. 10% to slash, 0 to pierce, 10% to strike, 0% to missile, and negative 10% to magic, unfortunately. He has 0% to AoE and single target. At level 120, Master Ability included, he has 8 base defense and 0 spirit. His resistances to statuses is going to be 50% to slow and disable, very nice on that, and 10% to immobilize. His Master Ability is going to be the mono element, obviously the buff, and then he gets 20% attack for himself, which is very needed and good that he has it because he does not have any attack passives, unfortunately. He has a 3-move, 1-jump unit, and he's 80 cost. And his passives, what I would recommend is going to be one of these 3 in general, which is going to be Mark of the Savage, Holy Knight's Protection, and or Shadow Runner. Mostly because you kind of want to boost his survivability because he does not have any offensive passives. In that regard, because he has 8 base defense, if you did use Holy Knight's protection, that does bring him up to 20%. I mean, not 20%, but 20 defense as a base value. So he also has a good amount of HP. So just in general, stacking up his HP will be kind of the play here. For Niche and Flex, which is arguably, I think, also one of his good passives in general, is Shikuchi. He can get 4 move and 2 jump if you wanted. Keep in mind, if he does go in alone that fast by himself, it is possible he just gets wiped. So you really want to be kind of careful on how you want him to use Shikuchi. If you used it maybe with like Zazan the Undying, and they're both at 4 move 2 jump, they could kind of go on a combo rampage. But without him, just keep in mind that he will be in the front line very, very quickly. For reaction abilities, I will say straight up, use Serpent's Grudge. Because every time, well not every time, but like at a good base chance at 30%, he can increase his attack by 30% for himself for 3 turns. And because he has a good base attack already, this is significantly going to help him deal a lot more damage. Additionally, Paladin's Guard is only going to counter physical damage. This is not going to save him at all against magic, even if he does survive. And Poison Barb is kind of niche, like super niche, so it's not really good enough in my opinion. Here we are at Muraga's rating out of 5. Unfortunately, just overall, I have to say he is a 3 out of 5 unit. I might even have to give him lower a little bit, but I think right now he has decent usability for now. So the pros, he's able to hit a base of 20 defense with his passive, as I told you, with the Holy Knight's passive. He's able to completely nullify debuffs on himself with the sub-drop ability, which is insanely good depending on the situation. And he has access to Immortal Spirit on his sub-drop for Paladin, which is the most important thing in his kit in my opinion. He has a very high base attack to basically make up for no offensive stat passives like Self-Sacrifice or like Nightblade Master, stuff like that. He doesn't have it, so just having his very high base attack is very, very good. He's able to generate hate due to the Taunting Blade. You can literally actually make him a physical tank if you wanted him to in that regard. I will say there are significantly better like units that can do physical tanking and or just tanking in general, so just keep that in mind. It's mostly going to be good for her damage. He has access to defense penetration for 20% and an ability for 30% slash penetration only for that ability, unfortunately. But yeah, this means he does have defense penetration viable and he does have slash penetration viable as well. He's able to be physically tanky, as I said, because he could do Taunting Blade. He has a lot of high HP as a DPS, so this is very good, especially with his HP passives. He could go very, very high HP. He has a decent agility already and can go even faster with like Shadowrunner. He's also able to get 4 move and 2 jump as well, so he's very mobile if he needs to be. He has a physical barrier break, even though he doesn't really have like a multi-hit outside of his ninja sub-job, so that's pretty good. Sorcerer's Shear can bypass reaction abilities, and a lot of people might be frustrated from reaction abilities, especially from Yuna, but he is able to bypass it with Sorcerer's Shear, so you can keep that in mind. He's focused on hitting, like inflicting slow onto enemies. He doesn't really have other debuffs, but he does have a slow, like granting ability from his attack. For the cons and his negatives, he's insanely short range on his strong abilities. Literally, Taunting Blade, if he does not have that, or like Doton or Shuriken or something like that, he has literally no range. He is gonna just be buffing if he can get turn and kind of struggling to get his attacks in without either like Shikuchi and or if the enemy team kind of runs up to him. So you have to be wary about that. He has to be reliant for his defense penetration, but it's only 20% for his like buff, and it's kind of unfortunate. It also grants him healing power down for 20% for himself. So that means healers are gonna actually have a harder time healing him in general. So he's kind of like an all-in kind of unit. You also have to keep in mind he can use Odoa's Apron, I do believe. However, if you are reliant on defense penetration buff and you do not get that buff off before like initiating on an enemy, you are significantly at a disadvantage, just significant. As I said, his AoE abilities outside of Taunting Blade are literally going to be only 1 range tile away from him. He is literally like super close range. You just have to keep that in mind, because if you do get kited or like a Frederica just keeps vital shotting him backwards and he can't actually like move up and he doesn't have 4 move because he chooses a different passive, hey, sorry, I guess he just can't do anything. If he does have Shikuchi or something, that's a different story, but there's a lot of different situations where this works. Because he just does not have any range outside of that, it's very difficult for him to get all his attacks out like properly. His slash penetration buff is only for that one single ability, the Reeve ability, and it doesn't apply to other abilities, so that does mean that if he's not able to use it, he can be blocked out by slash like resistance, so you have to keep that in mind. He's also vulnerable to stop, which is very important, but at least he is not vulnerable to disable. So it is a negative, but at least he does have a resistance to disable. And while despite his super high like firepower stats and bulk to survivability in terms of like high HP and a good amount of defense, if he does get attacked by a high defense penetration attacker or like Zazan himself, the Undying, he can get melted almost instantly because his resistances are not super strong in that department. Also, since he does not have any 100% hit rate abilities, but he does have accuracy and luck boosting alternatives, this does mean that evasion is still viable against them. Also, because he's a selection quest unit, he has no limit break, unfortunately. His resistances and his base spirit make for very easy targets for meta mages like Helena. I'm pretty sure a lot of people already know she is a monster, and if you do not have a magic tank and or enough mitigation from her, she kind of just melts all your units. So yeah, keep in mind Muraga has poor magic resistance, and he has 0 base spirit and no other resistances to help him in that department. He is going to be not really the matchup against her. Overall, Muraga is just basically a selfish DPS, and he's really unable to provide debuffs for his team, and he kind of struggles to guarantee DPS. It's kind of easy to lock out Muraga of damage. As I said earlier, he has slash penetration on his like one ability, but if he doesn't get that off because it's literally one tile away, he can never really use it. But it depends on the situation, and I do believe there are significantly better earth slashers as units, like DPS, like Zazan, or in the future we also have Noctis for Japan's side of things. He just falls out, like way too much out, and because he's so reliant on his buffs for even defense penetration alone, it just doesn't feel great to use him. He's more kind of like a more difficult character to use. I would say he's kind of like on almost Whisper's level of difficulty on how you want to use him in terms of how effective you want to use him, because if you do use Immortal Spirit on him as a buff, then you do have to realize he has to get his other buff on, the Serpent Stance, for defense penetration. If he doesn't get the defense penetration and you face a very tanky, like physical tank like unit, you're gonna have a very bad time, and he can't really do much about that. I will say for his Team Chase rating, I give it a 3 out of 5 because the Savage King's Great Axe, not only does it have a very competitive attack at 203, the crit rate and HP are kind of like poop. They're like not really that great at all, but most importantly, this is a weapon TMR that gives a decent amount of stat as well as the effect. The effect being your initial AP is increased by 25, so whatever you start with, which is for most characters, if they're like maxed out and everything, like high 20s through low 40s, this straight up increases that starting AP by 25, which is very nice for himself. This means he doesn't really have to use a TMR ability for more AP generation. He can use his other self buffs. So it's good in that department. Also, because it's a weapon TMR, which are very rare to be actually good or efficient, this is a nice slot in just in general. And here are some example setups that can work very well with Muraga. Obviously Zazan, if Zazan uses the Solitary Lion and then Muraga is kind of there to kind of just help him. You can use Titan for the additional physical damage, just so you guys are doing as much damage as possible. Or if you want to kind of buff Zazan even further, you would use Secret of the Hearts, because you just want to get Zazan to kind of evade. I will say, because Muraga does have Shadowrunner as a passive, he can get his luck stat up to a decent amount. Keep in mind, he doesn't really have any evasion nodes, and one of his passives actually just kills off his evasion rate as well. So it's really going to be just supporting Zazan to do a better job than him in that regard. Halloween Ryu, once it gets his EX, they're both going to be very strong slashers, so you can just pretty much... They do very well once the setup comes out, because they also both have Immortal Spirit as well. So like because Halloween Ryu also does the magic damage portion of things, if you do get walled up by high defense, then at least Ryu can kind of hit the magical defense portion of it. Katone is going to be good because Muraga mostly has strong single target abilities. Debilitator from Katone can significantly help Muraga deal like amazing, like super high damage. And lastly, we have Noctis. He's not going to be coming out for a very long time. He's on JP side of thing. However, they do have combinations together, because not only can Noctis kind of imperil Slash in general, specifically for Muraga, they both can kind of synergize because they do both have Slash types like attacks. So it is a possibility. Overall, this is what I believe on Muraga. I just have to say 3 out of 5. I don't think he's really worth like chasing or anything, but he is a selection unit, so he's free, so you should grab him actually. And I didn't say earlier, but his TMR to Axe can be used on other Axe users, such as like the Viking class or like Kilfy Summer version if it does come out for us. But yeah, it has a little bit more flexibility in that regard. But yeah, overall, I hope you like this review and analysis I did of Muraga, and I can't wait to kind of do the selection quest as well so I can get him and kind of just use him for fun, I guess. But yeah, until next video, peace out.